Enel was one of the most powerful and underrated antagonists to be introduced in pre-timeskip One Piece. But how did the God of Thunder lose to Luffy, and where is he now? Well, today we're covering everything we know about Enel. Enel's origin began on Burka, a sky island southeast of Skypiea, where he was born and raised. Nevertheless, Enel didn't care for his homeland, so he destroyed it after eating the Rumble Rumble fruit, a Logia-type devil fruit that grants the power to control and transform into lightning at will. Burka was said to be home to many strong warriors, but they were powerless before Enel. And if you want to be a part of my home, then make sure to like and subscribe to see more content like this. The Burkans are endowed with wings on their backs, but they're differentiated from the other two races by their downwards wings. We don't know much about Burka or their society before Enel, but currently the majority of Burkans have a mindset that revolves around a complete devotion to Enel. 8 years before the current One Piece storyline, Enel and his loyal contingent of followers overthrew the ruler of Skypiea, Ganfall, becoming the island's new ruler and enslaving the Divine Squad to build the Ark Maxim, a flying ship that uses Enel's powers as a source of energy. Enel's ultimate goals were to destroy Skypiea and travel to the moon to find the sacred land he believed was Fairy Verth. And after Enel took over, all the citizens of Skypiea lived in constant fear of him. His highly developed observation haki and ability to sense electric fields allowed him to hear conversations, and thus made him aware of almost everything happening in Skypiea. If anyone spoke out against him, he would eliminate them from the sky. Eventually, the Straw Hats arrived on Angel Island in search of Shandora, the City of Gold. There, they met Connis and her father Pagaya, citizens of Skypiea. They introduced the Straw Hats to the Skypiean society, and Connis explains that Upper Yard is a forbidden sacred ground where God Enel and his priests reside. Afterwards, the crew encounters the White Barretts, Skypiea's lowest level of law enforcement, and they're labeled as Class 2 criminals. The Straw Hats decide to leave, but while they're packing, the ship was grabbed by a giant shrimp that carried them to Upper Yard. Connis reveals that it was her who led them there because it's God Enel's will that they lead criminals to that island, and not following it will result in death. Enel begins a survival game between the Shandians, Straw Hats, and his followers. The Shandians have been in a constant war with the Skypieans over control of Upper Yard, and the previous ruler tried to find peace. However, once Enel took over, the idea was abandoned. Elsewhere, Enel was so bored that he decides to participate in his own game. He attacks the Shandian warrior Kamakiri and unintentionally knocks out all the warriors fighting along the river. It's only 2 hours into the survival game, and there's 25 participants left. Meanwhile, Robin reaches the City of Gold, only to find that there is no gold, and instead, she encounters Enel, who explains that he took all the gold for himself. Enel senses others above him, so he destroys the clouds, sending everyone falling to Shandora. During their fight, Wiper uses Sea Prism Stone to weaken Enel and uses his rejectile to kill him. However, with the stone removed, Enel restarts his heart and comes back to life, defeating everyone. With no hope of escaping, Nami begs Enel to take her with him to the dream world. She takes her waiver, plotting to use it for an escape, but after she sees the Ark Maxim, she realizes it's useless. Finally, Luffy reaches Enel, but he's stunned to find that Luffy is his natural enemy. He ends up making a trident with lightning to pierce his rubber, and although Enel is using observation haki to predict his movements, he's still taking a considerable amount of damage from Luffy. But ultimately, Enel gets annoyed and traps Luffy's right arm in a ball of melted gold. Enel then uses Raigo, one of his strongest techniques, to create a dark sphere of electricity, eradicating Angel Island. And just as he's about to obliterate Skypiea with an even bigger Raigo, Luffy takes advantage of the gold's high conductivity, successfully drawing the electricity into himself, forcing Enel to unleash his full power and transform. Luffy uses the gold ball to launch Enel towards the golden bell, rendering him unconscious. The aftermath left the Shandians and Skypieans without homes, so the sacred land of Upper Yard became their new home, where they coexisted. Furthermore, Ganfall was chosen to be God again by the people, and though we believed it was over for Enel, he regained consciousness and flew off to the moon in search of Fairy Verth. But his story doesn't end there. Enel's Great Space Operations is the 9th cover story in One Piece, and takes place after Skypiea. After landing on the moon, he finds an unconscious creature with a soldier's uniform. Enel attacks it with lightning. However, the creature turns out to be a mechanical life form, and the lightning recharged it. The robot identifies itself as First Lieutenant Spacey and takes Enel back to his fallen comrades on the battlefield. That's where Seymour, as captain of the space pirates, reveals himself and injures Spacey. Enel idly watches until Seymour tries to pierce him as well, but having a Logia type, it doesn't affect him and he defeats the space pirate. Enel sees a massive explosion and he's enraged by the sight of his Verth being damaged. The explosion was caused by the other space pirates, who were excavating the moon in order to plunder its lost ruins. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Spacey, who's still alive, reminisces about his creator. The automata were created by Professor Tsukimi, an old scientist living on Karakuri Island, the birthplace of the genius Vegapunk. But one day, while they were watching the moon and eating snacks, they saw an explosion. The professor, shocked by the unexpected event, forgets to chew, resulting in him suffocating to death. The 4 automata traveled to the moon for revenge on whoever caused that explosion, but they were easily defeated. Spacey continues crying and sees Enel destroying the excavation site and the space pirates with ease. Enel finds a hidden city within the crater the space pirates were excavating. He zaps the city along with Spacey's brothers, reviving them, and inside he sees the true history behind Skypiea. It turns out the Shandians, Skypeans, and Birkins all originated from the Moon City and invented the automata. After using all their resources, they decided to travel to Earth, leaving their creations behind. The automata then pledged their loyalty to Enel for reawakening them. Enel was annoyed, but he thought about how he was surrounded by endless followers, along with the fairy Verth he was searching for. Thus, he accepts their loyalty and becomes the leader of his new army. Enel was one of the strongest villains in One Piece in terms of power balance. At this point in the story, no one could beat him in direct combat. That is, until he faced Luffy, whose Devil Fruit made him his natural enemy. If he was less arrogant, he could have been even stronger. But he was definitely one of the most ambitious villains in One Piece. Also, Oda was asked in a fan letter what Enel's bounty would be if he descended to the Blue Sea, to which he replied his bounty could be as high as 500 million berries, and Luffy was lucky to be a rubber man. But that's going to be it for God Enel's story. If you want to see more content like this, then make sure to like and subscribe, as it greatly supports my channel. Also, let me know what you guys think about Enel and the true history behind Skypiea. And with that being said, I'm Traffy, and I'll see you in the next one.